Well, a very good morning to all of you. It's great to see some faces back from last night. And if you didn't join us last night, a very good morning and a welcome. Of course, last night, what we did do was acknowledge some entrepreneurs. Really incredible evening. In actual fact, one of the youngest awardees yesterday was a matric student who is doing impeccable work. So if you didn't catch on anything, we implore you to also go to our social media page so that you can catch up with everything. But today, what we're going to do is then have panel discussions, but I'll hand over to Nozipho to explain that a little further.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. What an absolute privilege and a pleasure to be serving you today as your co-MC and moderator alongside Thami. I want to take a moment for us to pause and to reflect on the conversations that we're going to be having here today. The clarion call that has gathered us from across the continent and indeed from different parts of the world is bright and clear. The clarion call is, how do we become increasingly more intentional in fostering collaboration between Africa's innovators, Africa's entrepreneurs, and the world leaders? Today is about ensuring that as the continent takes center stage with South Africa's G20 presidency, that we also are creating the conditions and the space for entrepreneurs to rise to their ambition of building businesses that are sustainable, that are value-adding, and that really help us to address some of the greatest socio-economic challenges. And so to that extent, you will see Thami and I in a series of formats. There'll be panel discussions, there'll be fireside chats, there'll be intimate in conversations, but all in all, you're going to hear 5 key themes coming out throughout the day today. You're going to hear us talking about what does it mean to be intentional about cultivating collaboration. You're going to hear us talking about what does it mean to be inclusive in how we achieve and diversify our growth, and what does that inclusion mean. You're going to hear us talking about what does financial velocity really mean for African entrepreneurs, beyond just access to finance. How do we make possible momentum finance for scaling and for growing across borders and for fueling our trade ambitions? You're going to hear us talking about Africa Unlocked and what that really means and how we tap into this billion people market that we have on the continent. And then finally, Thami is going to talk to us about the pathways to unified prosperity. What are those pathways and how do we seek them out? I've got one request of all of you today, and that is to claim your share of voice. And so to do that, I'm really going to ask you to participate in the Q&As that we're going to have throughout the sessions. I'm going to ask the team to please pop up our QR code onto the screen. And what that QR code is going to do, if you do a quick scan, it takes you to a really simple landing page. You're going to be asked to put in your name and your email address, and thereafter, for every single one of the sessions, you can put in your question. And in addition to that, you can also select to whom you'd like to pose your question.
I love the word of intention that Nozipho utilized. We've really taken into consideration, together with the Sinayo team, all the speakers that we will be having throughout the day. So there's no official protocol, but we want to acknowledge everybody that is in the room. We have government representatives. Some people will be coming in and out as we go through the day, and that's why we've opted not to do an overall protocol at the beginning of the day. So distinguished guests, really thank you for being here with us. Up and above that, what we have planned for you with intentionality, because we're obviously focusing on entrepreneurs. How do we elevate entrepreneurs within Africa, within the G20 theme? We've given an opportunity to some entrepreneurs to showcase some of their products and services in our exhibition area, which is just next door. We're not utilizing it just for exhibition, but it's also an engagement area. This is about collaborating. It's further than collaboration, it's about integration. It's an opportunity for you to grab a coffee, grab a business card, create a relationship, take this forward. Because the truth is, things that are worth it are created by each individual, not by institutions and associations. So it's up to you, it's up to me to advance Africa and the world, humanity, and society. Now, a few housekeeping rules. I know it's the boring part, but we have to go through it. There is Wi-Fi, just link on Southern Sun Wi-Fi. We ask that you please do not keep your cell phones off. Keep them on. It's not like a plane. Keep them on, but keep them on silent. We want you to take as many photos and videos as you would like, and please do then post them on social media. We're just going to ask you to please use our hashtag, which is right there at the top, #NextGen Africa, so we can help follow the conversation. In case of an emergency, don't worry, don't be alarmed. Nozipho and I, we got you.
Now, as we get off stage, it's our absolute pleasure to welcome to the stage somebody that I would describe as an African baobab. Her work towers. Her work is life-giving. Her work is inspiring, and her work has been transformational. But today, she steps onto the stage as our host and the person who has created this conversational space that has gathered all of us. Whether it is being the founding chairperson of ORCA or the many executive and non-executive director roles that she holds, she comes onto the stage today as the Chief Executive Officer of Sinayo Global. Ladies and gentlemen, the warmest round of applause you can muster this morning for Madame Babalwa Ngonyama.
Good morning. You managed to wake up from yesterday's dinner. Welcome, welcome. Let me acknowledge business people that are around us today. Let me acknowledge entrepreneurs, our young innovators, the change makers, women in business, our incredible Sinayo Global team that made this possible. Welcome, all of you today. Yesterday, we had an incredible evening. Colleagues, if you were not here, you missed out. You know, I'm still feeling that energy. The conversations that we had, the laughter, the shared visions, and of course, the celebration of incredible talent that was and is still represented in this room today. Last night, I shared a personal story about my grandmother, a woman who really shaped myself more than she'll ever understand. I related that she never asked me how was my day when I come from school, but she would always ask me, what have you achieved today? And I want to leave you with that question. It's a question that I carry with me in every boardroom, every business deal, and into rooms like this. Filled with Africa's next generation of entrepreneurs today, of innovators, of change makers, and leaders, I want you to think deeply, what is going to be your deliverable today? What are you going to achieve? Because if you look around you, this isn't just another conference. This is a platform, colleagues. This is a movement. This is the beginning of something bigger than any one business, but than any one person, and than any one country. And it is in our hands to make it a reality. So you are not just a delegate to a conference, you are participants. You are making history. For the first time, Africa's small and medium enterprise businesses, our young innovators, our women entrepreneurs are being positioned directly in the global conversations. So this is no longer a movement to admire Africa's potential from afar. This is our chance. It's our opportunity to turn potential into reality, turn it into plans, into real prosperity. We can't host B20 and not be part of it. It's for us now to be bold, step into it, grab this opportunity. Let me thank EY and Deloitte, who have agreed to take notes, colleagues, as we deliberate and as we participate, because our job at the end of the day is to make sure that we contribute towards shifting the global policy through B20. And I must thank our B20 colleagues for being part of this deliberation, being part of us, and agreeing that the SMMEs and entrepreneurs should be included in these deliberations. Thank you very much, Cas, for that, and thank you very much to the committee chairs of B20 who are here with us today. Let me just share quickly with you, colleagues, briefly the 5 themes that will guide our panels. The first theme that we are talking about today is inclusive and diversified growth. We cannot build a thriving Africa if the growth we pursue leaves people behind. Inclusive growth means we are intentional about creating opportunities for youth, for SMMEs, for women, for rural communities, and those who have traditionally been excluded. We talk inclusivity today. And diversified growth also means we don't put all our hopes on one sector. We're talking agriculture, tech, fashion, logistics, green energy, because it all matters. The Africa we are building must be one where anyone with a dream and the discipline to pursue it has a place at the table. The second theme is to cultivate collaboration. None of us can do this alone. Whether you are in fintech, a founder in Lagos, or you are a solar entrepreneur in Nairobi, or a cocoa trader in Abidjan, collaboration will always move you faster and further. They say if you want to run fast, you do it alone. But if you want to go far, let's do it together. So we will be talking collaboration. Yesterday, and we will see it today, we showcase the real collaboration between Sinayo and the Kagiso Trust. You know, we have worked together, we've been in trenches together, we come a long way with that company, and we share the same values. And today you will see more partnership with AFC, FTA, with Fewachi, with OCA, with a number of people around this table where we will be engaging and collaborating. I hope that you will take something from that. Another theme, the third one, is financial velocity. Colleagues, most of the banks are here. You have the biggest bank in the continent called Afrexim Bank. He will be here. Just ask as many questions as possible about money, you know. And then we have Standard Bank, we have ABSA, we have African Bank in the room, we have Investec in the room, we have investors from Netherlands. And amongst you, we do have people who want to invest on SMME and entrepreneurs. So as you walk around, just walk with intention. So it's important that we deal with the real issue that affect entrepreneurs, which is funding and capacitating the entrepreneur. The fourth is Africa Unlock. This is the heart of everything. We are done, colleagues, with asking for permission. We are done waiting for the world to see us. We see ourselves. We believe in our worth. We are ready to lead as Africans. Africa Unlock is not just about trade and infrastructure. It's about our mindset. It's about shifting from the limitation to liberation. We want to shift our continent from the mentality of aid to agency. We want to shift from being untapped to an unleashed continent. We matter. We matter to everybody around the globe. Let's take advantage of that. And the key is with us. The last one, colleagues, is unified prosperity. We're talking prosperity with unity. Again, when we work together, we go far. Let's not forget what this is all for. Unified prosperity means we all rise together, not just a few. It's a recognition that poverty anywhere is a threat to progress everywhere. You may not feel poverty in your household, but if it's somewhere in your neighborhood, it is a threat to your household. It's a commitment, therefore, for us to make sure that we progress together. We build economies that don't just lift GDPs, economies that lift people. It is prosperity with purpose, growth with dignity, and a future we all have. It must be brighter. Platform for action that I want to leave you with. Yesterday, you saw the work our company is doing. We started as a finance company. We have a hospitality business, an energy, and a commodities trading business across our beautiful continent. But none of it matters if we are not building with you. So our mission, therefore, is to build a platform, is to build bridges, not just for ideas, but for action. And as we continue today's journey together, I want to leave you with the same challenge I left with our colleagues last night. When it's all said and done, when our time on this earth is up, what will they write on your tombstone? We said, you don't want the title. We don't want your name. What legacy are you leaving behind? So as you engage today, think about that. We want you to remember and say, I was here like a Beyonce. I matter. I am important. I will build the Africa I want. Thank you very much and welcome.
Whoops. Let's try that again. Distinguished guests, I was here. I matter. And I'm not waiting for the Africa that we want. I am committed to building the Africa that I want. As we get into our very first panel discussion for this morning, I'm going to ask you to just be mindful that we want to hear your voice. So you don't have to wait to the end of the conversation to send me your Q&A. I've got my device here. So as the conversation unfolds, you're more than welcome to start shooting through your questions. And then to the best of my ability, I'm going to try and integrate those questions into the conversation. Our very first conversation is really on the question of inclusive and diversified growth. We've heard Madame Ngonyama saying we have to be intentional about reaching the sectors and the people that are often at the periphery, bringing them at the center, and also being sure that we are diversifying the well from which we are seeking growth. to help us understand what are the proven strategies that have worked when it comes to the integration of small and medium-sized enterprises and entrepreneurs broadly in the operational strategies of big business. These two panelists, I don't think we could have asked for anyone with greater wisdom and deeper expertise. It gives me such a pleasure to welcome Madame Nolitha Fakude to the stage. As she comes up, we know her, of course, in her capacity as chairperson of the Anglo American Management Board of South Africa. I call her my Madame Prez. She is Madame President at the International Women's Forum of South Africa. And I could spend the rest of the morning speaking about all the leadership roles that she occupies in different boardrooms in South Africa. What I am going to do is ask you to give her a big round of applause as she comes up. Thank you very much. I'm getting the sense that a lot happened last night at the dinner. Even our clapping is not as energetic as it should be. So we'll have to review whether the dinner happens before or after the conference next year, Madame Babalwa. My second panelist is someone I consider as a big brother to me. In many ways has been a blueprint for what leadership in corporate looks like in South Africa. He comes onto the stage in his capacity as chairperson of Aspen Pharmacare, chairperson of Alexandra Forbes, but we know him as CEO of Old Mutual South Africa and emerging markets. We also know he spent time as Massmart. All in all, a corporate titan in every sense of the word. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Kuseni Dlamini to the stage. Yeah. You're fine. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's going to be a very fiery, fast, concise conversation because I think there's just so much to talk about today, and I really want to get as much of the audience voice into the conversation as possible. The first place where I want to land, Madame Nolitha, is what is the risk of not getting it right? And when I say it, I'm talking about what if we're not intentional about including entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized enterprises, youth-led businesses, women-led businesses, and we just continue as usual. Let big business be big business. Let the G20 come and go, and it be about the integration of the B20 into the G20 agenda. What is the risk of not getting it right?
Thank you very much, Program Director Nozipho. And firstly, let me first congratulate Sinayo, especially led by our sister, Ms. Babalwa Ngonyama. Thank you very much for pulling this together. I was not here last night, but I understand it was just fire. So thank you for doing this. And also my brother here, Kuseni, it's good to be with you as a panelist. I'm not going to get to a lot of stats this morning. I'm going to leave that to my brother. But if you think about the fact that in 25 years' time, 2050, more than half the population of Africa will be young people, about 850 million, we know the numbers. And we do know that also we've got a youth dividend as a continent that allows us to move into different sectors and industries and also be part of the global economy, because they will be there when the rest of the world is actually aging.
Yes.
We do need then to be intentional in terms of how we develop the youth on skilling, develop them on the right skills that will be required for the future. So that's the first area. The second one is to make sure that even as we sit here today, talking about the G20 presidency of South Africa, and which is also an African G20, we need to make sure that our actions rather than talk are going to be what puts us on the global agenda on issues of trade, on issues of inclusive growth and development, but also practically give examples of what Africa needs to get as a dividend of this G20, so to speak, to say when we were here, this is what Africa was able to get out of this G20. Because if we don't do that, literally we are going to be left behind, and then we will have to suffer the worst situation, which we are coming from all the ages, where the skills of young people of our continent have always been used as unskilled labor
Yes.
elsewhere to grow other economies, and we're not able to get that dividend back into our own economies in the continent. So we don't want to be really unskilled labor anymore for the rest of the world.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the world is moving on. And if we're not intentional about being inclusive, not intentional about pulling the young people into enterprise, into industry, we could run the risk of just being another source of input, unskilled labor in other progressing and advancing economies. What I'm also hearing in between the words you've shared with us is the risk of jobless growth, is the risk of exclusive prosperity instead of unified prosperity. And I'm also hearing you almost speak to the idea of there's a greater risk around social unrest in terms of the kind of societies then we begin to look at. Part of the answer, and as I come to you, Kuseni, part of the answer that we've always thought is enough in terms of including small and medium-sized enterprises is enterprise development. And I want to challenge you in this question and say, is there space and opportunity for us to reimagine enterprise development so that big business can really play a catalytic role in how it integrates entrepreneurs and becomes a part of their growth ambition?
Thank you very much, Nozipho. Thanks to Sis Babalwa for her pioneering leadership in getting us all here to have this strategic conversation. I'm immensely privileged and honored to share the stage with my sister, Nolitha, here, who's a great source of inspiration. And of course, to have you as a moderator, second to none, first amongst equals. I've seen you on the global stage doing great things for South Africa and Africa. I would like to say that it's really important for us to reimagine, reset, and reframe our approach to enterprise development.
Yes.
Not to see it as an end in itself, but as a means to an end. I mean, the work that we did at MassMart was exactly that. When we set up our supply development program, it wasn't just for the suppliers in South Africa and in Africa to supply us here, but we said, how can we reset this and reframe it? We said, we don't want suppliers just to be focused on South Africa alone. How can we open up the Walmart global supply chain? We brought in buyers from Arkansas into South Africa to interact with our suppliers here and open up the channels for them to globalize their footprint. You look at Germany's economy today in Switzerland, about 85% of the companies there, someone was quoting that statistic at a function I was at in Cape Town the other day, are actually small and medium enterprises. These are plugged in the global supply chains of the blue chip global companies that we all know about and all admire today. And we need to see our supply development efforts and our enterprise development efforts not just focusing on being nice to small and medium enterprises or being kind and then bragging about it for PR, but it's very strategic. And they create most of the jobs in the economy, globally and locally. So if we don't do it, we are going to miss out a lot. We are going to deny ourselves the opportunity to have world-class companies. I believe also the dichotomy between small and medium enterprises and big companies is actually a false one.
Sure.
Because big companies cannot survive without the services and the products that the small and medium enterprises supply. And I would like to argue, Nozipho, as I just close my comments now, that today's small and medium enterprise has to be tomorrow's global giant. I'm talking from an Aspen perspective. Aspen was founded in a 4-bedroom house in Durban. Today, we're in over 50 countries in the world, by far one of the most globalized companies in South Africa. We have got a a footprint across all continents. Massmart was started with 6 stores, founded by Mark Lambetti, and it's a corporate giant now. So again, that the fangs that we're talking about now, the Magnificent Sevens, they're all founded in some dormitories at Harvard or Stanford or anywhere. So we really have to see this as very strategic. It's not a marginal conversation.
Sure. There's so many sound bites in there that I just want to lift to, because I know that as you're talking about global supply chains, I almost saw Madame Nolitha sit up because I know that she wants to come in on that point. But I want to highlight what you say about this is not about niceness and kindness. This is a strategic imperative to make, to create other businesses that thrive and grow. But what I'm also hearing you say is there's a possibility that we need to think about to what extent are we graduating businesses out of our enterprise development and supply chains, because for them to become big businesses in their own right, we almost have to enable them to the extent of letting them go. But I want to come back to that point. Let's just stay on global supply chains, Madame Nolitha, just with you for a moment. The safer thing to do has always been to look for small and medium-sized enterprise in the community, to give them a piece of the delivery that is not high dependency, that is not high risk, to have them play at the periphery. But the idea of opening up the global supply chain is another level of intentionality. From your perspective, if we did that, firstly, what needs to change in how big multinationals and big corporates think about the role of entrepreneurs in their global supply chains? But most also, how do entrepreneurs get themselves ready to not play at the periphery and to be within the global supply chains?
Yeah, so definitely there are lots of opportunities there, but we need to understand that it's a multi-pronged approach.
Sure.
Because to access global supply chains, we need to have scale.
Okay.
We need to have unique innovation and technology that goes with us being part of that. And I think the easier example to think of at this point is that of the auto industry in South Africa. For us to be able to say we are a strong industry, we are having a strong auto manufacturing industry, we need an integrated supply chain just within the African continent as a start. There is still that goes into motor manufacturing.
Yes.
There are technical parts, digital parts, and in South Africa, we currently manufacture about 40,000 cars that get exported. And out of those 40,000 cars, the components that go into there, some of them are manufactured in Botswana, and then they come to Roslyn. Some of them are
So it becomes a regional play.
It becomes a regional play. But you can't have that. That's why the Africa Corridor Free Trade Agreement is important, because you want to make sure that the African region is able to trade amongst itself, within itself, and have this manufacturing and processing and value add beneficiation take place within the continent before you export, because that's where you create value. So it's going to be important that when we talk about global supply chains, we first strengthen our own regional supply chains by developing the required skills. Secondly, we have a mining industry as a continent, which is a resource and a benefit that we have as a continent.
Yeah.
And mining is a catalyst for economic growth in any society. And if you do not use that for local beneficiation, so you can mine your copper in Zambia, because that's where the majority of the commodity comes from. But it has got to be processed somewhere in the continent. So if you don't have processing and manufacturing capacity in the continent, it means you are taking that copper and exporting it raw to the rest of the world. Those are jobs that are exporting out. Those are opportunities for inclusive economic growth around your local environment that are taken out of the continent. And therefore, the risk is that you sit 20, 50 years later and say, we used to have a particular commodity, but we've got nothing to show for it. So we've got to talk about how we integrate, build capacity, and the infrastructure that enables it. Because to have a processing plant, for example, you need to have stable energy, power energy to do this. Same for motor manufacturing and so forth. So governments have got to come to the party, private sector has got to come to the party, and obviously accessing the trade that governments are able to unlock for us as business people through bilateral discussions, and also using platforms like the G20 to make sure that you get the good trade deal for the continent is going to be important.
So as you're speaking, Madam, I'm literally listing all the ingredients that you are saying need to be in the boiki pot for us to really get this right, because it sounds like just showing up as an entrepreneur is not going to get you into those global supply chains. There are other players that need to step into that space and to bring their strength. I'm hearing you talking about initiatives that allow entrepreneurs to scale, to tap into technology. The policymakers need to come to the party. We need integrated supply chains that start even within the region so that we graduate onto the continent. I'm hearing you talk about infrastructure and capacity and an intentionality around the industrialization ambition, because that's the only way we really start to beneficiate. And then, of course, that Africa becomes an option because we've got trade enabling corridors and agreements to let us do that. So all of that, would Kuseni, could be there. And we have an incredible entrepreneur. And that entrepreneur comes into the business and they are fantastic. The overriding mindset would be, how do we keep this small and medium-sized enterprise, because they tick all the box, they deliver the technology, they do what's required in the supply chain, they are compliant, they deliver on time. And I want to go back to your earlier comment to say, how do we flip that mindset to, how do I graduate this entrepreneur so that I release them to being a business that in their own right now trades across borders, in their own right now lists on the National Stock Exchange, and that we create the space for a new enterprise development player or supplier to come into the pipeline. And it's a long-winded way of saying sometimes when we find the unexpected stars, we don't want to lose them. And so we curb their growth by keeping them in programs that that they've grown too big for.
So I think we need to let them scale up, let them grow, and we need to be deliberate in terms of building this right enabling institutional and structural mechanisms to enable our small and medium enterprises to scale up. For me, scale and complexity and internationalization has got to be the measure of success. So we have to liberate them and allow them to unlock their full potential so that they can trade across borders. And again, let's remember, Africa has got 1.4 billion people, but you talk about the whole world's population is over 8 billion people, and the South Koreans are the same size as South Africa, or similar size as South Africa. Their perspective of their companies and their entrepreneurs is very global. So we need to inject and inculcate a global mindset amongst our entrepreneurs so that they design products and services, not just for 66 million South Africans or 300 million people in SADC or 1.4 billion people, but for 8.2 billion and above and more people, so that wherever you land in the world, you'll see South African brands and the world will feel like home. Just like I'm sure it feels for Americans and increasingly for Chinese now. Wherever they go, there's a Chery, there's a BYD, and they see the motor vehicles.
True. That's absolutely true, because as you say, it is about seeing the market as bigger than the market that you're in now, but as an 8 billion people market.
Just an example of Singapore, which is a country that is doing an excellent job, country of 6 million people. They are very deliberate about helping their small and medium enterprises. They've got an entity called Singapore Enterprise. It's part of their Department of Trade and Industry.
Yes.
Their full-time job is to help Singapore's small and medium enterprises internationalize their global footprint. They reach out to corporates globally. They allow them to access supply chain opportunities. And those are some of the best practice examples we can emulate and implement as a country.
But there's somebody challenging us in the audience, Kuseni, and this person is saying, I hear you and all your beautiful things, but what about the informal sector? We always forget about the informal sector. What do you have to say in response to that?
I think the informal sector is an untapped terrain of opportunity and a space where entrepreneurship is really buzzing. There are a lot of kids that are taken to school by mothers that are selling in the informal sector, whether it's cabbages or tomatoes, and they keep the fires burning and they send the kids to universities. And those are the kids that end up outperforming your St. John's kids and Bishop's kids at UCT and go on to Harvard to do great things and become great leaders. So I think we need to find ways of supporting our informal sector, not as a buzzword, not as a PR thing. There is a temptation for business leaders and politicians to use it as a vote-catching thing or popularity context, but to really say, how can we leverage this grassroots entrepreneurship that is there, that is driven by people taking their own initiative? How can we support them? Every other sector in the formal sector gets some kind of subsidy and support from government in one way or the other. But the informal sector people are on their own. They don't get any support. That's a space that we need to take very, very seriously and try and support.
I want to squeeze one more question before we're almost out of time. And I really appreciate that answer that you've given us, is to almost unveil the invisibility of the informal sector when we start thinking about growth and diversified growth and inclusive growth, that they too are a sector in their own right. The question that I've got from the audience is, Nozipho, please ask Mam Nolitha, what is Anglo American doing to include women in particular? What's the lens and the gender lens in particular that Anglo American applies as you think about driving inclusion and diversified growth?
So we have within Anglo American group, so that will be Kumba and now Valterra Platinum, and also DBS and others in the group, procurement programs. And those procurement programs are skewed towards making sure that within what we refer to as the doorstep or host communities, there are opportunities that are accessed by those businesses, and women being key, and also the young people. And through a program that we have been running for years called Anglo Zimele, that has been our key catalyst for these opportunities, where you bring in women-owned businesses and youth-owned businesses into our supply chain. Because the challenge for SMEs is always access to markets. So you have an integrated approach that says, we help you access funding and we partner to leverage finance, for instance through ABSA, the IFN and others, to bring that capital that is required by these entrepreneurs so that they can produce for Anglo American and the other companies around there. And for us, where we try to manage the risk of dependency on one customer, because this is the issue where SMEs in those communities face, is that you've got this one company that you are producing for, whereas you should be saying, this is my seed starting point that will enable me to be seen as a credible supplier by 2 or 3 other companies in the sector or across the value chain. So we spend a lot of time around incubation and development and scaling of those suppliers, but definitely it's within our strategy.
So we've run out of time. I see Kuseni is relaxing now. He's like, oh, she's asked me all the questions. I've got one more. And it's a trick question because you've not seen this question. And what I'd like you to think about is we're going to put up a billboard. We're going to put it right outside the Sandton Convention Centre. Madame Babalwa is going to pay for it. So it will have a Sinayo Global logo on the corner. But it's a billboard, right? So it's not a chairperson's report or executive summary. It's a billboard. And it starts with 2 words, without entrepreneurs. And you get to complete the sentence. So as you think about that, short, sharp, concise, and to the point. So what typically happens at this point is that the most confident person looks me dead in the eye, and it seems as if it's Kuseni this morning. And the person who doesn't want me to come to them starts to look away. Madam, you can bring your eyes up. So, but Kuseni, without entrepreneurs,
Without entrepreneurs, we are messed up.
there we
We're
go.
in a
It's
mess.
good enough. Without entrepreneurs, we are messed up.
We're messed up.
We
Yeah.
love that. Let's give him a big round of applause. Absolutely love that. It's authentic and it's real. It might have to go through approval before it's actually put outside, but we'll take it. Without entrepreneurs,
He was very, very polite, messed up. He could have used a stronger
I
language.
know that other one.
For me, without entrepreneurs, we've got no global south to talk about.
Ladies and gentlemen, without entrepreneurs, we have no global south to even speak about. Let's give my panelists a big round of applause. Thank you so very much. I'm going to invite you as we get off stage and make way for Madame Thami and her next conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, a little bit of a round of applause for them, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to quickly introduce my speaker. Ours is a little bit shorter. I only have a one-man show together with me. So please help me warmly welcome to stage Cas Coovadia, who is the Sherpa for B20 for South Africa. Round of applause, please, as Cas makes his way to stage. Don't worry, I've already given him a hug before, so that's why I'm not doing that. So great to see you. So great to see you. I'm going to give a precursor to all of this. So the topic that we have to discuss is, and I'm going to read it exactly the way it is in the program and then give you a precursor. It says, Africa at the G20. Global Cooperation for Local Impact. How can South Africa influence G20 priorities for the benefit of African entrepreneurs? And I'm known as the message architect fondly globally. And the reason I like to architect messages is I don't think we're short of conversations. I think that if you Google how many conferences are happening at the moment, there are plenty in the globe. I think what we lack is understanding and literacy. We use this big jargon that people don't understand, and then they can't advance humanity and society. So my first point of call, before we even get into the conversation, I said to Cas, I think we need to break it down for everybody in bite-size and understandable. We're talking G20, we're talking B20, we're talking U20, we're talking Y20. What are all of these things with the letters and 20 and the differences?
Well, the 20 is essentially the 20 significant economies in the world. Okay, South Africa is honored to be a part of that. The African Union has now become part of that, as has the EU. The G20 is a critical structure where the G20 governments get together. To look at a whole range of issues. Now, these are the biggest economies in the world. They're responsible for 75–80% of economic growth and so on. The G20 then has various streams. The critical streams talk to everything that government should be dealing with. But then there are other streams for business, for youth, for urban growth, for academics, and so on, women, and so on. And I can speak for B20 because I'm the Sherpa for the B20. What we do is we bring C-suite people from the G20 countries together with business organizations for the G20 countries together to, in 8 task forces, talk about the policy environment that they need in the G20 countries to enable inclusive growth, to enable prosperity, and to do so in a cooperating world. That's the theme for this year's B20, inclusive growth, prosperity in a cooperating world. And so certainly from a B20 point of view, this is an opportunity to bring businesses and business organizations of the biggest economies in the world together to talk about a policy environment, come out with recommendations, which we then hand over to our president. We're certainly planning in the B20 to do that early September, for him to then put into the G20 deliberation. Then we hope that, and we will advocate, we hope that a number of those recommendations are actually talked about in the G20 communique in November.
Fantastic. Now that we've got the jargon out the way, I think what we need to be speaking on precisely that B20, because when you talk entrepreneurs, you're talking businesses. And we see a lot of tracks within B20. Are they all inclusive? Are they inclusive of all entrepreneurs? Or which sectors are we focusing on? And what are the priorities that we're focusing on that will then benefit the entrepreneurs of South Africa and Africa?
Okay, so we have 8 task forces, ranging from trade and investment to education and jobs to energy mix and just transition to business and ethics to digital transformation, through food security and agriculture, and then industrial transformation and innovation. Now, each of those task forces have between 150 and 200 people per task force.
Wow.
Because we have to accommodate all the G20 countries. We want to make this an African B20. So we've invited C-suite people from other parts of the continent. So, and what we've done, we had a big debate about whether we have a separate task forces for women empowerment and SMEs. I'm not one in favor of separate task forces, because what happened is SMEs sit in a task force, they talk about the issues, and then nothing happens after that. So what we've done is we've said that every task force must hard code SME development and women empowerment. So when the recommendations come out, I want to see in those recommendations from each task force how SMEs are going to be enabled and empowered, and how women are going to be enabled and empowered. So, and I've been at pains to say that this is firstly not a business-to-business initiative. It's not an initiative where every business in South Africa is going to get involved. So businesses are involved through organizations like BUSA and others. And the recommendations that come out are B20 recommendations. But what we've done is we've ensured that there are strong South African representatives, as well as African representatives on each task force. And it's their job to actually put on the table African and South African priorities, and to, through the process of discussion, ensure that those are reflected in the recommendations that come out. So that's how it happens. And what we then encouraging is for South African business to say, okay, with all the experience that we've learned in this last year through the B20, the research that has been done and so on, how do we leverage of that to grow SMEs in the country, to empower women in the country, to bring up to scale a lot of the stuff we've been talking about.
And it all sounds great in terms of the way it's structured for strategy. But the truth is, the build up to G20 really got entrepreneurs very excitable on the ground. And those that are even in remote areas, they want to know, what's the benefit for me as an entrepreneur? I think it was beautifully put yesterday by one of our speakers. Entrepreneurs don't need exposure and all of that anymore. They need funding, they need practical things. How is it this going to benefit the entrepreneurs at grassroots level as individuals?
Yeah. So let's take as an example. One of the things that the finance and infrastructure task force is going to be discussing, and is discussing, and that's chaired by Tshabalala, is how do we structure finance so that it actually reaches where it should be reached.
Sure.
Okay, so blended finance. How do we look at developmental issues and so on? So that will be discussed, some recommendations will come out. Our challenge as South Africans is to say, here's a recommendation that says that this is the way we should be structuring our financial interventions to empower SMEs. The recommendation has been informed by experiences of the G20 countries, has been informed by research and development done by management consultants that are supporting the process, we have network partners like the World Bank, like the World Economic Forum, like the OECD, who bring all their experience to bear. So we have a set of recommendations with a whole lot of background to it. How do we then, as South Africa, apply this to ensure that we put into place a mechanism to get that finance down to the SMEs? Okay, so a lot depends then on the individual G20 countries on how they're going to actually take up those recommendations and apply them in their own particular situations. And that's what we've got to do. Now, I think we also need to be honest. We've done a lot of talking on SME development and so on. There are some low-hanging fruit that we can do without the B20s and the G20s. The B20 actually gives us more leverage, more information, more research, but things like getting rid of red tape, things like structuring financial products so that they reach the SMEs, things like Nolitha was talking about and Kuseni, about ensuring that SMEs aren't just linked to one firm, but they're into the entire supply chain.
Right.
Challenges to our corporates, major corporates, like they were talking about, that ensure that SMEs are in our supply chains. So there's a whole lot of stuff we can do. We don't have to wait for anybody. And I think we need to do that with a realization, as Kuseni said, without enterprises we are whatever. I won't use the word. But the bottom line is that our SME sector, compared to many of our peers, is undeveloped. We have a small SME sector. We should be growing that sector because that's where the jobs are going to be created. That's where innovation is going to happen. And so if we want to not only grow our economy, but sustain that growth, we can't do it without SME growth and development.
I've actually got a question from the audience, and I'm going to read it verbatim just out of respect. It says, the root of the word economy is household management. It seems like the priority of B20 is for small businesses that must grow into big ones. What about the ones that want to stay small but not strong?
Well, I don't, if you want to stay small, you've got to have a pretty good reason to do so.
Right.
Because today you've got to get to scale to actually make a difference. So your ambition shouldn't be to stay small.
Agreed.
Your ambition could be to stay niched in particular markets.
I like
but
that.
For growth, right?
Yeah.
But not small.
Yeah.
And today I think you have opportunities that we didn't have in our days. You've got to digitalize. You've got to understand the new way of doing business. And the new way of doing business is bringing the cost of business down.
Yeah.
It's increasing your ability to actually have a significantly more outreach to a significantly more diversified range of markets and so on. And we've got to ensure as a country that we enable SMEs to participate in that sort of economy. So make broadband cheaper, make sure that people are connected. It's those sorts of stuff that
Disparities.
we can do. And we don't have to wait for anybody to do that. We just need to take the decisions, direct our resources properly, because we have the resources. It's not that we don't have the resources, and do it.
I'm going to squeeze in one more question, because the fact is G20, by November, it's moving on. And if we're talking impact, we need to be talking long-term legacy. So what are we wanting to achieve for entrepreneurs as a long-term legacy? Because November is around the corner.
Yeah. So B20 also moves on, and we hand over to America, which is going to be interesting.
I didn't want to say it.
Which is going to be interesting. But one of the things that the B20 does is it has legacy projects. And there are three types of legacy projects. One is B20 to B20, which is, so Brazil, who had it last year, put some legacy projects on the table. We want to see if we can continue that, develop that, and pass over to America. Second is B20 to society. And that's projects that any G20 country, B20 business organizations could put on the table, but that are relevant to a host of G20 countries. The third one is B20 to the host country, okay? And there we in fact today, we're sending out criteria and processes for people to identify legacy projects that we
Great.
can put on the table for South Africa.
Great.
And grow those and use the leverage of the work done by the B20, the experience to grow those projects here.
I like that inclusion.
And the other thing is that we also, as this B20, we're trying to put into place a mechanism, and we're talking to American Chamber of Commerce, and as soon as the 2027 hosts are identified, we'll pull them in, to see if we can develop a mechanism where we track whether the recommendations that we make to the G20 countries are being implemented.
Oh, wow.
And if they're not being implemented, why and what do we do about it? So that, because up to now, these things haven't been tracked. And if we're representing business in the B20, we want to demonstrate impact. We want to demonstrate that the recommendations that come out are actually being implemented.
I think that's beautiful. Accountability is the way
Yeah.
to implementation. We've run out of time. You know, we'll just call each other and have a coffee and carry on, and then I'll
Okay.
tell everyone on social media
Will
what you
do.
said. A round of applause, please, everybody. Cas Coovadia. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone, again. Yeah. It is a real pleasure to have the CEO of Kagiso Trust with us today. An incredible company. A company that in 2025 is celebrating its 40th birthday. 40 years of impact. Eh? You see, it's amazing, guys.
Thank you, thank you.
So what we would like to hear is, how did it all start? Why Kagiso Trust?
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. Good morning, everyone. And firstly, congratulations to Sinayo Global. We are really honored as Kagiso Trust to be part of your journey as well. You know, I was reflecting that for many of us who would recall what was happening in the 1980s in the country, this country was on fire. And it took huge sacrifices. It took people who said, we can't sit down unless something happens. And Kagiso Trust was a fortunate place where leadership had the foresight to say, we cannot stand when people are crying for political emancipation and not do anything about it. So Kagiso Trust really started to solve a social problem, which was political exclusion. I must say, yesterday I saw the ambassador of Japan here. We were greatly supported by the Japanese agency, embassy. The EU supported us, and other countries supported through Kagiso Trust to create that mechanism that is able to deal with the legacy of apartheid. If you'd recall, there was a time when there was a call for sanctions, and that environment was created by the leadership of Kagiso Trust. But also, at that time, there was a need to support victims of apartheid. People's livelihoods were cut off, and Kagiso Trust was that vehicle to support the victims of apartheid. Obviously, post-1994, we took a different shape, and that's what we are at the moment.
Yes. So you are such inspiring, you know. Most of the people who know you, they only remember good things about Kagiso Trust. And you're taking us through the challenges and the difficulties that you have had. And in fact, the fact that the environment itself was not necessarily conducive for this kind of business that you are in. How was the journey? Just take us through that journey.
And thanks for the opportunity, because truly Kagiso Trust is an organization for all South Africans. Before 1994, as I mentioned earlier, that we were supported through grants from other countries. 1994, we had to think about how else do we continue with the work that we are doing. And we had an opportunity to create investment companies, because now we needed to grow capital to continue to do the work, the social work that we are doing. Currently, we are fortunate that we have investment companies. We have Kagiso with investment in Kagiso Tiso Holdings, where we met you, and also Kagiso Capital, which is a 100% owned subsidiary of Kagiso Trust, which enables us to do the work that we are doing. Obviously, post-1994, we had to prioritize. I mean, just listening to us today, we are talking about entrepreneurship. The reality is that it's not the only social problem we have in the country. I'm not sure you sitting here, when we heard yesterday that 3 million people have to be helped with a cup of soup to have something warm in their stomachs. And I was thinking, what if they were all entrepreneurs? They didn't need to follow that queue to go and get a cup of soup. So the issues are many. So we had to prioritize. We prioritize education. We prioritize entrepreneurship through a program called Socioeconomic Development. We prioritize local governance. Local governance touch every single part of our lives, including entrepreneurs that we are talking about. But also very much important, this country was built on the very strong voices of the civil society organizations. We think it will be a sad day when we continue with our lives without making sure that that sector is robust and is supported. So those are the main areas where we are operating at the moment.
Colleagues, are you picking up something here that says Kagiso Trust started from nowhere? And today we are talking about your conglomerate. And I'm saying so with some knowledge here, colleagues, that I want to share with you. Kagiso Trust was started by people like you, Desmond Tutu's, Frank Chikanis,
The Bears, Nodia.
Yes.
Father Mkwachwa.
Yes. We have about 7,
Yeah.
7 members who started Kagiso Trust. And as you can imagine, those people had no money.
Nothing.
The last panel spoke to us about the fact that big business start from being small businesses. Kagiso Trust is that typical example. The asset base of Kagiso Trust, it goes into billions to date. We are not talking 2 billion here, colleagues. We're not talking 5 billion for this company. Don't judge them by their softness. Make no mistake here. I'm sitting here next to the powerhouse. They carry assets. So these are the type of companies that we are bringing to you to say it can be done. They've done it under very, very difficult circumstances. Just talk to us before we take questions from people. How do you find the balance between making money and still having a social impact? Because most people always find it very, very difficult to pursue both. Though some of us understand that money is a tool, but there's a purpose that you always pursue.
Absolutely.
And you've shown us. How did you do that?
I think the first thing had to be about thinking about sustainability of the work that we do. We cannot afford to do a stop and start. The work that we do in communities, they need to be comfortable that we'll be there again the following day and enable them. So we have to manage our finances and be as entrepreneurial. Yes, we are an NGO, we are a PBO, but we have to be as innovative, as entrepreneurial like everybody else. And also we have to think about the programs that we are implementing. And I just wanted to give an example. There are many highlights. One of the big programs we are known for is an education model called Whole School Development Model. We we think deeply about the challenging space that we are entering and think deeply about what are the systemic issues, what should we solve? We can't solve everything, but we then say what are the parts that if we manage them, they'll have ripple effect. So the model in education helped us to do so. Of course, there are other challenges. While we are in education, you would recall during COVID time, we focus in rural areas. While our learners here in the urban areas were able to continue learning because there's connectivity. In rural areas, there's no such. We had then to think, what else can we do to enable that environment? Hence, we started doing rural connectivity. So some of the things that we do are born out of the bottlenecks that we encounter as we continue. I must say, I'm excited today that one of our first entrepreneurs for rural connectivity, Pumzile, if you're here, you can just wave, that we acknowledge you. There she is at the back from Sikukune. So we are really, really excited. Through her, we started connecting the villages, the clinics, tribal communities, but most important, we went there to connect schools. So those, we choose carefully because we cannot be everywhere. One of the other programs is what I like, I've loved hearing people talk about agripreneur and property entrepreneurs. We think it's quite important that the least transformed sectors of entrepreneurship, that organizations like ourselves should enter that space and hold hand and orchestrate the ecosystem to make sure that the industry is inclusive for these entrepreneurs. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the space. But we are not focusing on these areas because they're a destination. We are saying we are building these as models which should be actually scaled and shared with others. It's not an IP for Kagiso Trust. We are not trading with this, but we are saying we are sharing it with South Africa, we are sharing it with Africa. We've got our SADC partners that we also collaborate with, that we share the knowledge.
Wow, wonderful. Nozipho, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. We have a fantastic question from Anonymous. And the question says, Dr. Mankodi, congratulations on 40 years, firstly.
Thank you.
Kagiso is truly a social enterprise. And here's the question. How do you manage the tension between profit and purpose?
Yeah, that's a very good one. I mean, we are as profit could get. We want to maximize returns. Our investment firms are run by super high qualified professionals. So we want to optimize that return on investment to the highest. But we also know that our resources, and that is why we have the kind of board members that lead the organization, their values, their purpose is quite pronounced in terms of every cent must go towards making sure that we build the programs. So there's never a confusion that because it is the trust that owns the investment. So 100% of the dividends goes into the trust. The second one, we are a very transparent organization. Though the law does not require us to have AGMs in a true strict term, we do have AGMs just to make sure that we are accountable to the communities that we serve. That keeps us in check and to make sure that we are spending the money the right way and efficiently and effectively.
Wow. Colleagues, what I can share also, because I am also a product of Kagiso Trust. The Sinayo Global that is hosting you today, it comes from those shoulders of the companies.
Thank you. Yeah.
So when you work with Kagiso Trust and its investment like KTH, they are very clear about the purpose. They don't mince their words there. And they understand that they still have to sustain their businesses.
Exactly.
They still have to pay salaries and make money therefore. But they do not allow money to be the end. So we would sit in the boardroom and start by talking about what are we supposed to achieve here. And then in the middle of the discussion, we talk about the how. So we saw the money as a tool that is enabling us to achieve that purpose. We saw the money as a typical car that brought you here. You drove your car, some of you took Ubers or taxis. Those are the tools that you are using to get to have this conversation. It brought you into this room. That's one thing I learned from Kagiso Trust. Don't be confused and think that the tool now becomes your purpose and it becomes your end goal. And I thank you very much for that. It clarifies my mind in many ways, and it's something that we continue to carry on as we run our own businesses. Do we have any other questions? This is the last one.
I think we've got time for one more, and it's to the both of you. And it says, to the powerhouses on stage, could you please give us one nugget each, a key takeaway that you want for all the entrepreneurs in the room?
All right. We'll start with yours.
Yeah. I'm always inspired by the farmers that we work with in Mopani. These are farmers that people say they cannot be de-risked. They cannot produce consistent supply on time at the right price. As we speak today, every single morning, there is a truck that is collecting cocktail tomatoes to come and supply 70% of the demand in the country. These farmers, few months ago, were not part of the value chain in South Africa. And we are proud that working together with them, they were saying, give us a chance. Wow. We don't understand these bank models that kicks us out. We don't understand who created those criteria. But please help us because we are ready to stand up. And I must say in the room that I've seen retailers who are collaborating amongst themselves to actually create a bigger market. I had a point about single market risk. It's a very important risk. But I've seen corporates joining together to mitigate that risk. Yes. Because entrepreneurs, the young entrepreneurs or emerging entrepreneurs are time-starved. We wanted about 15 of them to come here today. And do you know why are they not in this room? They said, we cannot afford because this is our harvest time. You see, they are visionaries, they are farmers, they must process, they must make sure that their product is on time to reach the market. So as we meet here, I would say, let's have confidence in our entrepreneurs. They have what it takes. In any case, we cannot be excited when only 10% of agricultural produce, for an example, in South Africa comes from black farmers. That number is so wrong. Definitely. And we can't celebrate it. It can't be, it doesn't matter who put the food on my table. We have to have these farmers who are raising their hands to say, we'll make it happen for you. And we are able, as government, as NGOs, and as big business.
Wow, wonderful. For me, colleagues, one takeaway that I want to leave you with, being an entrepreneur, it is not easy.
Yeah.
It is hard. I just want you to know that, so that when you go through challenges, you understand that it is the nature of the game. It is what it is. It therefore requires that you really have what we've been talking about, a very clear purpose in life. Something that wakes you up in the morning when the tough goes on. You are able to be pulled out of bed and still keep on going because you are not done yet. You know, you have something to look forward to. So if you have not crafted that purpose as an entrepreneur, as an SMME, please do yourself a favor because you need it. You need to also build resilience, colleagues. A resilient entrepreneur is something that is critical for scaling up a business. We need strength. You need to develop yourself from your body, your mind, and your intellectual ability. You even have to take it even spiritually as well, as an individual. If you are not strong body-wise, an entrepreneurship can bring you down. So work on your health, defend yourself as much as possible. What you eat, your exercising, don't take that for granted as an entrepreneur. Your intellectual capacity, self-development, making sure that you're ready for your customers. And one more thing I want you to live with, which sometimes we make a mistake as entrepreneurs. Business is about our customers. It's not about us. Leave your little self out of the settle here. Focus on the customers. Let me just give a little example. I always say, great example, when we go to countries like DRC, for example, we find South African entrepreneurs who says, what can I sell to the DRC? Can you please open markets for us? We always say, visit that country, see what they eat, how they use your product, what matters most. If you sell potatoes, what kind of potatoes do they use in the DRC? If it's meal, what kinds and what grades? Once you sell something that they need and they use, the chances of you then making money and satisfying then your customer needs is great, and the chances of scaling up, they become much bigger. So entrepreneurs, it's not about me, it's not about us. It's that customer that matters most. And lastly, colleagues, on this journey, commit and collaborate.
Yeah.
Collaboration here, you see this Sinayo and Kagiso Trust. We meet, we engage, we move things forward. Once we collaborate, even with big businesses like Bidvest, as I mentioned yesterday, we can move mountains. Today we have Jacaranda as our media partner. They are taking your messaging today to the world. We have AFCTA today who are taking this to the 54 African countries. You can't do that alone. We have Anglo American who is taking us globally. We have all these banks, the African banks. I'm trying to say, when you think, do not shy away from looking for partnerships, because that's when you will move mountains and make big things happen in your life, and not just small movement. Yeah. We want to move the needle as entrepreneurs.
Collaborate and aggregate.
Collaborate, aggregate. Let's work together.
Absolutely.
Let's move mountains together.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I could feel the energy on the stage pulsating, and that our speakers just wanted to give us more nuggets and more nuggets and more nuggets, and we're here to receive all of them. Thank you so much for that insight. Profit that is tightly intertwined and aligned to purpose, an intentionality about building resilience, right down to your well-being as an entrepreneur, making sure that the customer remains at the center, and of course, never losing sight of the power of collaboration. Distinguished guests, we are ready to take our first tea break. But before we go, I'd like to just make a few announcements. The first of these is to invite you to please engage with the exhibitors. They are in the coffee and tea area, and they really want to welcome you. You'll also note that we have some engagement areas in the same space, so connect with others, make use of this engagement and networking opportunity as well. I want to just quickly steal the opportunity of just having Madame Babalwa on stage, and as the founding chairperson of ORCA, just to remind everyone, if you might not be aware, but ORCA is having their annual conference and gala dinner on the 6th of August. They are looking for your partnership. They're looking for you to buy packages to attend the gala dinner and the conference, as well as to buy tables. And at this particular gala, they're going to be acknowledging their Women of substance. This is a woman who has absolutely been high impact across sectors and really is a depiction and a reflection of value and substance. If you would like to buy a ticket, if you would like to buy a table, all you need to do is please just have a look at their website, or alternatively to email them at talent@orca.co.za. That's talent@orca.co.za. For us, it is 1:15. I'm going to ask if we could kindly please be back in the room by 22. Let me tell you what's coming up next so that you're not late for what's coming up. We are going to be unpacking the question of how do we truly unlock Africa. So I'll see you at 22:12 as we sit in for our next session. For now, please do enjoy your coffee break. Thank you so much.